Sign here, the lawyer said, tapping the line with a Montblanc pen. Your wife gets everything. Everything. My house. My car. My savings. My dignity. I was 40. Jobless. Homeless. Sitting in a suit 2 sizes too big, one that still smelled like the cologne I used to wear when I had hope. And across from me, Taylor, my perfect, angelic wife, wore black like she was at my funeral. Her lips curled into a smirk as she leaned in just enough to whisper, "This is what happens when you marry up, darling." She didn't even blink. I signed it. 15 years later, that same woman, now dolled up at designer desperation, stormed into my boardroom like she owned the oxygen in it. She didn't knock. No one did anymore. Not since I became CEO of Griffin Meyer Holdings. Not since I turned my pain into profit. Not since I built an empire from that very moment in that lawyer's office when I realized I had nothing left to lose. Taylor burst in with 2 other people trailing her, her brother Brian and their family's lawyer, Davis. I remember Davis. He used to pat me on the back like I was a lost puppy. I remember Brian too. He once laughed when Taylor made me sleep in the guest house for forgetting her brunch reservation. They weren't laughing now. Only you can stop the bankruptcy, Taylor hissed. Her eyes were wide with panic. Her voice cracked with a tone I hadn't heard in over a decade. Need. I leaned back in my leather chair, the skyline of Manhattan glowing behind me, and said, calm as a monk in a war zone, "Let me tell you a story." Brian opened his mouth. I held up a hand. "You want a signature? You'll get it. But first, you're going to sit your spoiled little asses down and hear how this all started. Because the first time you asked for my signature, it was the day your sister cheated on me." Davis frowned. Taylor went pale. "And trust me," I said, locking eyes with her, "I remember everything. It started 15 years ago, 2 weeks before the divorce papers. I had just left my marketing job to start a consultancy, my dream." Taylor smiled, said she believed in me, told her friends I was a visionary. But at night, she'd come home late, her hair perfectly tousled, lips slightly smudged. She always had some story, a networking event, a girls' dinner, her Pilates class running late. The first crack? Her phone. She used to leave it everywhere: kitchen counter, bathroom sink. Suddenly it was glued to her hand. Even in bed. One night, she went to shower. I don't know what came over me. Maybe instinct. Maybe stupidity. But I took her phone. Face ID didn't work. Password was changed. So I used our dog's name. Then her sister's birthday. Then mine. Nope. Then I saw it, her recent text to T. At first, I thought it was a friend. Until I saw the message preview. "Your body still tastes like last night." I sat on the bed, numb. I remember the way the silk sheets felt under my palm. Cold. Fake. Just like her. The shower stopped. I heard her humming. I should have left then. Should have packed my things, walked out, vanished. But I didn't. Because I was still in love with her. And I needed to know everything. That night, I told her I had a migraine and slept in the guest room. While she was asleep, I did what any broken man would do. I read every message. Every single one. They'd been meeting for months. Hotels, office closets, even our house when I was at meetings. He called her Mrs. Power. She called him King. Their messages weren't just vulgar. They were cruel. She mocked me. Told him I was useless, boring, a backup plan that turned into a paycheck. He laughed. I stared at her the next morning as she buttered her toast and asked if I wanted OJ. She kissed my cheek. Said, "You're quiet today. Everything okay?" I nodded. Everything was not okay. Because that was the day I started plotting my comeback. And it would take 15 years, a fake bankruptcy, and a new empire. To bring her to her knees. She always thought I was slow, predictable, too soft-spoken to ever fight back. That was her mistake. People like Taylor forget that the quiet ones are the ones who watch, who wait, who build. That morning, while she kissed me like I was too dumb to notice the lipstick smudge that wasn't mine, I made my first move. I called in every favor I had. Friends in IT. A cousin who knew private investigators. Old colleagues who owed me loyalty or feared I'd eventually be their boss. I wasn't wrong. Within days, I had everything. Photos. Voicemails. Transaction logs. A receipt for a diamond bracelet she claimed she wanted at a charity auction, which was actually bought by her little side project, Travis Marks. Financial advisor, part-time bodybuilder, and the man dumb enough to use his own Amex to pay for a room at the Langham under the name Mr. and Mrs. Marks. The last name should have made me laugh, but I wasn't there yet. I compiled it all into a folder. Labeled it Proof Taylor is Trash. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I held on to it like a loaded gun. The breaking point came one evening during dinner with her family. We were sitting at her parents' absurd marble dining table. Her father was bragging about how Taylor would be inheriting the family's real estate assets, how she was the future of the company. I smiled through my steak, watching her play the perfect daughter, the poised wife. Under the table, my hand was in a fist. Her brother Brian raised a glass and said, "To Taylor and her amazing husband, who's lucky to be part of this family." Taylor laughed. Then she added, "Well, maybe not for long." They all laughed. Everyone but me. Later that night, in the car, I asked her what she meant by that joke. She rolled her eyes. "It's called humor, Liam. You should try it sometime." God, you're so sensitive. That night, I slept in the guest room again and made one more call to a guy named Michael Griggs, a college friend who had since made a name for himself buying up distressed companies and flipping them into gold. We had joked once about creating a shell company for fun. That night, it stopped being a joke. I told him my idea. Help me create a new company, one I could hide behind. I wanted to pour everything into it. Not just money. Me. My skills. My obsession. I didn't care if it took a decade. I just needed one shot to build something bigger than anything Taylor's family ever touched. Michael laughed. "Man, you sound like you just got betrayed by the Roman Empire." I said, "Close. Try Taylor Jennings." He said he was in. For the next year, I pretended to fall apart. I let Taylor see me broken, drinking, making bad investments. I even faked a panic attack in front of her just to make sure she believed I was slipping. She bought it. Eventually, she told me we should go on a break, just until I got my act together. I nodded. A month later, the divorce papers came. The terms? Brutal. She took everything. Said it was to protect me from myself. Her lawyer even had the nerve to tell me, "This is for your own good." She's being generous. And like an idiot, I signed. Only I wasn't an idiot. Because while she was redecorating our penthouse with her lover and throwing parties in my name, I was working 18-hour days in a basement in Jersey, building a tech startup that would eventually get bought out for 8 figures. But I didn't cash in. Not yet. Instead, I reinvested. Acquired 2 of her family's old competitors. Quietly took a seat on a board that once laughed at me. And I waited. Until today, where she stood in front of me, desperate and cornered, needing the one man she thought she destroyed. Her brother cleared his throat. "Liam, we made a mistake. The trust is still in your name. Without your signature, we can't access the funds. We'll lose everything." I could feel the weight of that moment pressing against my chest like a storm finally arriving. For 15 years, I had replayed that day. The pin. Her smirk. The silence that followed. Now, they were the ones silent. And I wasn't going to let them off easy. So I said, "You want my signature? Fine. But you'll sit down. All of you. You're going to hear everything first. How it started. How I watched your golden girl turn into something foul. How I built an empire just to see this moment." Taylor scoffed. "You're so dramatic. Just sign the damn paper." I stood up slowly, walked around the table, and whispered in her ear, "You remember what your little boyfriend used to call you? Mrs. Power." Her breath caught. "Funny thing," I said. "He applied for a job at my company last week. I had security walk him out." Her face fell. And now it was just beginning. Taylor froze. Her pupils tightened like pinholes, mouth twitching as she tried to hide the panic crawling up her neck. I could smell the tension on her skin. Expensive perfume can't mask fear. Brian leaned forward, clueless. "What the hell are you talking about?" I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on hers. "Travis Marks," I said slowly. Went by T in her phone. Drove a black Tesla. License plate had her birthday on it. Real romantic. You know what else is romantic? Watching a man's face collapse when he finds out the woman he sold his soul for was just passing time. "Liam," she hissed. "This isn't the time." I laughed. Not a chuckle. A real laugh, raw, unfiltered, almost joyful. "Taylor, this is exactly the time. You think this is a boardroom negotiation? No. This is confession." I turned to Brian. "She told me you were a screw-up. That your father only kept you around because you had his last name. She used to tell Travis that your ideas were brain fog with a tie." Her words, not mine. Brian's face turned purple. Taylor spun toward him. "Don't listen to this psycho. He's just bitter. You know how long he's waited for this." 15 years, I said. 15 long, deliberate, beautiful years. Brian stood up. "Is this true?" Taylor didn't answer. That silence was the loudest scream in the room. I sat back down. Now, about the signature. Davis adjusted his tie. Liam, please. The company's drowning. Hundreds of employees, investors. This is bigger than a personal issue. If you just don't, I snapped. Don't you dare appeal to my sense of decency. None of you gave a damn when you handed me those divorce papers and told me she was doing me a favor. Taylor crossed her arms, trying to look composed. You're pathetic. You're still holding on to ancient history like it means something. I stared at her. You're right. It does mean something. It means I remember exactly who you were when the lights are off and the mask slips. She narrowed her eyes. What do you want? You want me to grovel? Apologize? Say I regret it? I leaned in. No. I want you to admit it wasn't worth it. That caught her off guard. What? You heard me. Admit it. Look me in the eye and say giving me up for a muscular moron and some extra validation was worth 15 years of building a fake empire. Her lips parted, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came. I stood and turned to the window, the city blinking beneath us. I used to think love was sacrifice. That if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, stayed patient, it would all be okay. But what I learned is this. Some people don't want love. They want leverage. And when you give them everything, they use it to climb above you, just long enough to kick you back down. Silence. Then Taylor muttered, You're still the same wounded little boy I left behind. I turned slowly. No. That man died the night I found your texts. The man standing here now built something you never will. Loyalty. Power. Legacy. You chased shiny things. I built a diamond mine. Brian was sweating now. Davis looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I walked over to the table, picked up the papers. Tell me something, I asked her. When you took everything from me, did you sleep well that night? She hesitated. Did you at least feel powerful? She said nothing. Because tonight, I said, sliding the papers back across the table, I will. They stared at the unsigned pages like they were poison. Taylor reached for them, her hand trembling. So you're not going to help? I smiled. Oh, I am going to help. But not until you hear everything. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every little humiliating detail you left buried under your designer rug. Brian sat back, rubbing his eyes. This is a nightmare. I nodded. Yeah, yours. Mine ended the day I decided to turn pain into purpose. Taylor whispered, You won't get away with this. And I whispered back, I already did. She stood there, lips pressed into a line, so tight it looked like blood might break through. That sharp little jaw she used to tilt at me in victory now looked like it was barely holding her rage together. Brian finally said what no one else had the spine to. So what do you want from us? I turned my back to them and poured myself a glass of water from the crystal decanter on the bar behind my desk. I didn't answer right away. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted every second to burn the way I burned for months, confused, betrayed, humiliated. I took a sip. Cold. Clean. Like starting over. Then I said, slowly, I want you to understand that everything that's about to happen was written the moment you decided I was disposable. Taylor scoffed again. Her fallback defense. When truth hit too close to her bones, she mocked it. Jesus, Liam, are you going to drag us through some melodramatic monologue or just say what you're doing? You made me irrelevant, I said. You gave away my inheritance. You told your lawyer I was too fragile for leadership. You told Travis that I was a temporary investor in your life. Well, guess what? Your temporary investor just bought the land under your whole ing house. Her eyes flared. What does that mean? I turned to Brian. It means your company? Jennings Estate Group? I've been buying your debt for 6 months. Through shelf firms. Through proxies. You're leveraged to your eyebrows, and you didn't even see me standing behind the curtain. Brian's mouth opened. Closed. Then again. Like a fish out of water trying to find air. Taylor didn't get it yet. She was still locked in ego mode. You're bluffing. I walked over to the drawer, pulled out a thick folder, and tossed it on the table. Brian lunged for it. Davis reached over and started flipping pages. With every turn, Brian's hand shook more. Davis muttered, Oh God. Taylor stepped forward. What? What's in there? The mortgages, I said. The refinanced buildings. The commercial leases. The unpaid taxes. All of it. Owned by Griffin Meyer Holdings. Owned by me. Taylor stared at the folder like it might bite her. I smiled. So when I say I already did get away with it, I mean I now own every key to every door you ever slammed in my face. Silence. Then Brian dropped the folder and sat down, rubbing his temples. Davis said nothing. His face had gone pale. Only Taylor remained standing. She leaned in, her voice low and venomous. So what? This is revenge? That's your grand play. I shook my head. No, this is justice. Revenge would have been quick, maybe public, maybe messy. But justice? That's slow, quiet, cold, like the way you left me. She laughed. A brittle sound, sharp like shattered glass. You think you're impressive? You're still pathetic. Look at you. Still obsessed. Still needing to be the victim. I stepped closer. No, Taylor. I needed to be the victim. Back then. I needed to hit the bottom so hard that I'd wake up. You gave me that gift. And now, I'm giving you yours. She narrowed her eyes. Witches. I took the papers back into my hands. Slowly. Deliberately. Mercy. And I ripped them in half. Taylor gasped like I just shot someone. Brian stood up so fast his chair clattered to the floor. Are you out of your mind? That's our last legal leverage. We need your name on those papers. I looked him dead in the eyes. You needed me 15 years ago. You just didn't know it. You chose her. You all did. And now, you live with it. Taylor stormed toward me, face twisted in rage. You're doing this because you're still in love with me. That's what this is. You still want me. I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. And when I finally caught my breath, I said the one thing that turned her mouth into stone. Taylor, I haven't thought about loving you once in 15 years. I've only thought about making sure you'd one day stand in front of me exactly like this. She said nothing, just stood there, furious, powerless, and completely irrelevant. Her face collapsed in slow motion. You could see it in her eyes, the first real crack. Not the performative frustration, not the fake tears she pulled out when things didn't go her way, but real fear. She wasn't used to not being in control. She wasn't built for it. Taylor was born in a world that bent for her, where money smoothed her messes and charm hid the venom under her tongue. But standing here, stripped of power, surrounded by the ashes of her carefully built illusion, she looked small. She took a shaky step back. So what now? You destroy everything? Watch us burn. I tilted my head. No, that's too easy. Brian looked up, jaw tight. Then what the hell do you want? I walked back behind my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a second folder, this one slimmer, cleaner. I want you both to feel what I felt. But more than that, I want you to need me and hate it. I opened the folder and placed the first page flat on the table. It was a proposal, a buyout offer, for pennies on the dollar. Taylor scanned it. Her lips parted as she read the number. You're offering that, she said, voice tight. It's not an offer, I said. It's a rescue. One I'm not obligated to give. One I don't even need to give. But I'm giving it. Because I want you to wake up every day knowing that the man you humiliated saved your empire. Brian muttered under his breath, this is a joke. I looked at him. No, Brian. The joke was thinking you could bury me. Taylor slammed her hand on the table. You're disgusting. And you're empty, I said without blinking. And deep down, you know it. You knew it when you begged Travis to validate you. You knew it when you left me thinking I'd never be more than the man you stepped over. I leaned forward. But here's what's really going to hurt. You'll sign this deal. Because you have no choice. You'll take my lifeline. Because if you don't, your legacy goes up in smoke. And then you'll wake up every morning, sip coffee in your big house that you don't own anymore, and remember that your ex-husband bailed you out of the grave you dug. Taylor said nothing. She was trembling. Not from sadness. From rage. I picked up a pen and rolled it across the table toward her. You wanted a signature. Now you can give me one. Brian stared at her. We can't. Dad would never allow this. I smiled. Your dad is 2 weeks from foreclosure and 5 from being exposed in a fraud scandal I could trigger with one email. He'll say thank you when he sees this offer. Brian looked at Davis. We need time. Davis looked like he'd aged 10 years and 30 minutes. You don't have time. Taylor's jaw clenched. She picked up the pen. Paused. Then she looked at me. I hate you. I nodded slowly. Good. Hate gives you something to hold on to when pride is gone. She signed. So did Brian. When they were done, I neatly placed the papers in a folder, locked it in my desk drawer, and stood. You can leave now. Taylor didn't move. So I stared her down. You wanted to see what a man with nothing to lose would become. Now you have. Look at me. Really look. She did. And for the first time, there was no smirk, no snide comment, no dismissal in her eyes. Only silence. They walked out. No handshake. No thank you. No last word. Just the door closing behind them. And I stood there alone, finally, not broken. Just free. The silence after they left wasn't the kind that felt empty. It was the kind that hummed with closure. I stood there for a while, one hand resting on the cool surface of my desk, the other still touching the drawer that now held the signed deal, the one that put me in full control of everything they once used to define themselves. For a brief second, I remembered the night I slept in my car outside the city, just a week after signing my life away during the divorce. I had $46 in my account, a single bag of clothes, no apartment, no family to turn to, just the sharp sting of humiliation and the sound of my phone buzzing with her messages, none of which I opened. I remember watching the city lights flicker on as the sun set behind the skyline and swearing to myself, "You're not going to die like this. You're not going to let her write your ending." 15 years later, I had rewritten it entirely. I sat down again, slowly this time, and opened my laptop. A message from the HR department blinked at the top of the screen. Subject, Travis Marks, application update. I opened it, rereading the polite rejection letter they'd sent him on my behalf. After thorough consideration, we've decided to pursue other candidates. Thank you for your interest in Griffin Meyer Holdings. Simple. Cold. Perfect. I added a single postscript below it. P.S. She called you king. You acted like a pawn. I had sinned. Then, for the first time in years, I took a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That night, I didn't go home to an empty apartment. I didn't go home to a bitter memory. I went home to a place I built, not just with money, but with grit. With nights spent learning instead of drinking. With mornings of silence instead of shouting matches. A home where peace lived, not performance. I poured a glass of bourbon and sat on the balcony, watching the city stretch beneath me. It was beautiful from this height. I thought about love. Real love. Not the kind Taylor performed in front of her friends, but the kind that grows from scars, from trust, from truth. I hadn't found it yet, but for the first time, I was ready. I thought about the next morning. The phone calls I'd get from their father, the press releases they'd scramble to write, the rumors that would float around the industry. I'd hear it all, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the silence that followed their footsteps out of my office. The click of the door as it shut them out. The weight that finally lifted. I didn't need revenge. I had power. I didn't need an apology. I had proof. And I didn't need her love. Because I had mine. My own. Earned. Forged in fire. Polished in silence. And no one was ever going to take that from me again. The next morning started with light rain. One of those slow, steady drizzles that feels like the world hitting reset. The city looked softer through the window of my penthouse. Less harsh. Less crowded. I stood there with my coffee, watching streaks run down the glass, and for the first time in over a decade, my reflection didn't look like a man surviving. It looked like a man living. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Davis, the lawyer. Board emergency meeting today at 11. They're asking if you'll attend. I stared at it, let the screen dim, and set it down. No reply. Not because I was being cold, but because they weren't my priority anymore. I already knew what the meeting was about. Their father would be panicking. Investors would be threatening lawsuits. Banks calling in favors. They'd try to contain the fallout, act like they had a plan. But there was no plan without me. And I wasn't stepping in to fix anything else for them. Let them feel the discomfort I carried alone for so many years. A few hours later, I went down to my driver, Marcus, and told him to take the long way to the office. I wanted to see the streets again, to feel them. The neighborhoods where I once handed out resumes. The coffee shop where I used to sit for hours just to stay warm. The park bench I'd slept on for a week, wrapped in a worn hoodie with my name embroidered on it, one of the last things I owned. When I arrived at the building, people stood straighter. They always did now. I walked through the lobby, nodded to security, stepped into the elevator alone. On the 42nd floor, my assistant Jordan met me at the door. You've had 7 calls from Jennings Estate. 2 from Davis. 1 from Taylor. Voicemails. I asked. He nodded. Want me to summarize? No, I said. Delete them. He hesitated. Even the one from Taylor? Especially that one. I stepped into my office and closed the door. The quiet hit different now, not like loneliness, but like command. I sat, opened my laptop, and reviewed the buyout contracts again. Clean. Ironclad. Irreversible. They couldn't undo this even if they sold the family name to the highest bidder. The only thing holding them up now was the grace I had chosen to give. The same grace they never showed me. My desk phone rang. I answered this one. It was Michael Griggs, the man who helped me build the first company, the one who gave me a basement and a shot when I had nothing. You hear the news? He asked. What part? They're done. The press just dropped the leak. The Jennings family is insolvent, and they've officially transferred controlling interest to Griffin Meyer. I said nothing. Michael chuckled. You did it, man. They called you crazy. A dreamer. A charity case. And now? You own their legacy. I didn't want their legacy, I said. I just wanted mine back. He paused. What now? I looked out the window. The skyline was clearing. The clouds pulling apart. Sunlight pushing through. Now, I said, I build something that matters. Not out of pain. Not for revenge. But for purpose. And maybe someday, love would return to my life, not desperate, not manipulative, not a trophy parading around in lipstick and lies. But something quieter. Realer. Something that didn't need an audience. My story didn't end with a ruined man clawing his way out of a grave someone else dug. It ended with a man walking out of that grave, brushing off the dirt, and paving a road for others who thought they'd never rise again. I didn't need applause. I didn't need closure. I just needed this silence. And in it, finally, I found peace. 2 days later, I got one final letter. Hand-delivered. No envelope. No legal seal. Just my name, in her handwriting, folded carefully and left with my receptionist. Taylor's last word. I stared at it for a while. I knew what it would say. The apologies dressed in manipulation. The self-pity disguised as reflection. The subtle suggestions that maybe, there was still something between us. I tore it in half without reading it. Because some endings don't deserve to be rewritten. Some people don't get the privilege of closure when they denied you yours. I'd spent 15 years carrying that weight. Now it was hers. I walked down the hall of my company, and past people who nodded, smiled, respected me. Not because of my suit or my title, but because of what I'd built. Because I'd crawled through fire, and instead of burning, I forged steel. I stepped into the elevator and looked at my reflection in the mirrored walls. Same eyes, same bones, but not the same man. The man who had once begged for love that treated him like a burden was gone. The man who signed his own freedom away because he still hoped for a flicker of decency buried. What remained was a man who had learned the hardest truth. That sometimes, your greatest betrayal is your greatest rebirth. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. As I stepped out, I saw a couple walking in, young, hand in hand, glowing with that fragile kind of hope I once had. I didn't resent it. I just nodded politely, stepped outside, and let the sunlight hit my face. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like the world was watching me rebuild. It felt like it was simply mine again. No revenge. No drama. No audience. Just peace. And a man who earned it.